Welcome back. Time to bring in our panel with so much to talk about this week. With us today, 2016 Vice Chair for the Indiana Trump campaign, Tony Samuel, Democratic strategist Brian Gaddy, and two former state lawmakers, former Republican State Senator Jim Merritt and former Democratic State Representative Terry Austin. Great to have you all with us today. This may be one of the most consequential weeks in the news for these former running mates, Donald Trump and Mike Pence, since the events of January 6th, perhaps. What do you make of the significance of this week's news for both former President Trump and former Vice President Pence?
Well, Mike Pence had a great week. He was on television, CNN, Fox. I believe his speech was terrific out in Iowa. He had a lot of people from Iowa. And when you can say in a speech that you've met and looked Putin in the eye and Xi, I think that's powerful, and I think he had a really good week.
Terry, how do you see this news from across the aisle, particularly of Donald Trump's indictment and what that means now for the race for president in 2024?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the remaining Republican candidates respond, because Mike Pence has sort of come out, and while he had I would say somewhat strong words during his campaign announcement, he pulled back a little bit today. In regards to, I think he again said the weaponization of the Department of Justice, but he's clearly coming out and taking a strong stand against his former running mate.
In some respects, at least, right? He's punching at him in some ways, but on others, it's not as much.
And it's going to be interesting to see whether the other Republicans follow suit.
Tony, can the former president survive this indictment politically? Certainly within the GOP primary electorate, he may be able to, but how does he move forward here?
He can survive just like he's survived the Russia hoax, just like he survived the impeachment charges, just like he survives all of the harassment, because he's got that support, and people support him because he talks about issues and resonates with them, with the issues that Americans care about.
These aren't the Stormy Daniels charges necessarily. These are some pretty serious charges in this.
Let's go back to the Presidential Records Act, which passed in 1978. There's no criminal provision for this very reason. This is not something that should be criminalized. They're going after him again. It might be someone else. It might be a special counsel, Jack Smith this time, rather than Robert Mueller and James Comey, or Comey, the former FBI director. But it's the same folks that are going after him. So this should have been something that was handled, and they were cooperating. Then there was the pre-dawn raid at Mar-a-Lago. People were not happy with that. This is the second part of that. They expected this. Now it's happened. His poll numbers are still above 50. Mike Pence is at 3%. You got your 1%ers, your 3%ers. Sure. DeSantis is around 20, and then you've got Trump, and that's going to continue.
So you think it'll galvanize? And Brian, are you concerned this will have a galvanizing effect for those Republican primary voters coming to Trump's defense, or do you think this might finally hurt him politically, given the scope of these charges?
It could very well galvanize Republicans to support former President Trump. But the problem for him is if he becomes the nominee of the Republican Party, it's going to hurt him in the general election. And I don't think anyone can say that swing voters are going to vote for a candidate who's under federal indictment and state indictment. And there's two more indictments that are coming down the pike for him. I mean, you think about Fulton County, Georgia, along with January 6th. So it could be conceivably possible that within 3 or 4 months, he could have 4 indictments hanging over his head. That is really a loser in a general election, no doubt about it.
Jim, your thoughts on that, even if he's able to survive politically in the GOP in the primary process? Do these kinds of charges damage him politically to the point where he may not be electable as a general election candidate?
I think the general election is a very difficult situation for him, just like in 2020. I do believe that we need to, at some point, talk about the system, about the institution. And it's a day when the current president's under analysis, and what he has done, along with the idea of President Trump. And I think we all ought to be worried about the political world, but also about just about the way of life in America, with really the political system going to the shredder in some regards.
Let's also talk here about Mike Pence's campaign, because Jim and Terry, you both served with in the General Assembly during the Pence administration when he was governor. Your thoughts on how he might do as a candidate for president? Terry, I'll start with you.
Well, I think he will work hard to run a strong campaign. I think he has a very uphill climb. You know, Tony, you say 3%, I read 6%. And with the number of people in the field, how he's going to distinguish himself. If I had served 4 years as a vice president and that was the highest I could get at this point, I'd have to think long and hard before I ever jumped in the race in the first place.
Tony, can Pence make a run of things in Iowa? We mentioned those poll numbers there in the single digits. What do you also make of the Indiana elected officials who have and have not endorsed? Speaker Houston came out and endorsed him this week, but we haven't seen a lot of endorsements from Indiana Republicans yet.
And we might, and good for Speaker Houston. You know, he's showing conviction. He's showing, you know, that he's willing to take a stand. Back to the first part of your question, can he make a difference or an impact in Iowa? I'd be really concerned. There were not a lot of people in that room. You have Donald Trump, thousands, and that's what scared people in the beginning, the establishment and the Democrats. You don't have that for Mike Pence. And then, you know, from Adam Wren's report, they bust in his family and friends. I'd be really concerned that his numbers don't get above 6 or 7%. We'll see how he does when I'm sure he'll have another unveiling or another announcement here in Indiana.
Jim, I'm going to come to you. Do you think we'll see more Indiana Republicans endorse him?
I think you will, but on the political aspect of Iowa, those are national polls. Mike Pence is one of the best retail politicians of our time. You take him into a diner in Iowa or in New Hampshire or South Carolina, he knows everybody, and he can sit down at a table and talk to somebody. And he's also a former legislator, so he understands. I think he's going to be an outstanding president if he gets there, but I wouldn't count Mike Pence out.
You sound like an Indiana Republican who might be close to endorsing him, potentially, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm just reading.
I grew up with him, so he's a longtime friend.
We'll see what happens in terms of those endorsements and whether there are more of them. Brian, what do you make of that in terms of Indiana Republicans? Mike Braun, Suzanne Crouch, a number of the candidates for governor kind of taking that hands-off approach. That's not atypical, but here you have an Indiana governor in the race for president. Are you surprised we haven't seen more of those endorsements?
Because you know Donald Trump runs the Republican Party. The Republican Party is dominated by MAGA, and we can't forget what happened on January 6th. Hang Mike Pence. The majority of Republicans in the Republican base support Donald Trump. And I don't know how Mike Pence breaks through. I just really don't.
We'll see what happens here in the race for president in the coming months with Mike Pence, Donald Trump, the news of these indictments. A lot going on, no doubt. We appreciate your insights there. Coming up, as many Hoosiers celebrate Pride Month, there's growing concern in the LGBTQ community with the Human Rights Campaign declaring a state of emergency this past week. We'll have some reaction coming up next.